So hello and welcome to our next installment of Lexington Books author conversation series with the book series, The Anthropology of Tourism, Heritage, Mobility, and Society. I'm Michael Giovine. I'm the series editor. I'm also an associate professor of anthropology at Westchester University of Pennsylvania and the director of our Museum of Anthropology and Archaeology. I'm also the convener of the Anthropology of Tourism interest group at the American Anthropological Association. And I'm just really delighted today to have such an interesting book to discuss right around Valentine's Day. But before we do that, I wanted to just say a word or two about the book series. If anyone's considering it, we have a great mix of people here, some people from the interdisciplinary tourism and critical tourism studies networks, but also I have my own anthropology students and other anthropologists that are here. The Anthropology of Tourism, Heritage, Mobility, and Society series provides anthropologists and others in the social sciences and humanities with cutting edge and engaging research on the cultures of tourism. And I want to mention, of course, that you don't have to be an anthropologist or either really conduct a real anthropological study, whatever that would mean, to be in the book series, but that rather you have to you would want to share and embrace anthropology's holistic and comprehensive approach to scholarship and this sensitivity that we have towards diversity of human expression. And so, we did a number of webinars last year in 2020 with some of the new books that came out in the series. The last one we did on wellness and tourism, which is a fantastic edited volume by 4 non-anthropologists. And it really was very wide ranging and interdisciplinary in nature. And I really love that. And I think that's one of the things that really drew me to our author today and his book, The Rethinking of the Anthropology of Love and Tourism by Sagar Singh. It's a really great interdisciplinary, poetic even book that really teases out and problematizes the role of anthropology, the role of love and tourism and the different forms of love and tourism. So one more just brief pitch here as well. This is the first in our 2021. There'll be others that are planned. The first one in March, and I don't have the date nailed down yet, but which I should because it's my book. But I'll be talking to myself. But no, I'll be my co-editor and I, John Bodinger de Uriarte, and I will be talking about our book that just came out a couple weeks ago, Study Abroad in the Quest for the Anti-Tourism Experience. And then in late April, we will be talking with Sergio Gonzalez Varela on his book Capoeira, Mobility and Tourism. Another really awesome book. And I don't think, Sergio, you're here right now, but I'm going to try to tie you to. You're going to have to do some capoeira moves if you're when you present to us. So definitely stay tuned for that. We also have a number of really interesting books coming out. Actually, our next. I believe our next book that's coming out is also about India. Certainly, one of the next ones is going to be about care and wellness tourism in India. So stick around when we do that webinar as well. So, we're recording this on February 12th of 2021. We're in the midst of a pandemic. We're leading into Valentine's Day here in America. People are saying, don't travel for Valentine's Day. Don't go out, largely don't go out to eat. Don't do these things that are very touristic. So this is also weighing on us as we have our discussion today. But I wanted to first introduce Sagar Singh. He's a researcher and editor with the Center for Tourism Research and Development in Lucknow, India. And like I said before, this was just a fantastic book. I remember reading the peer review, who the reviewer was blown away. I think, I don't even know who it was, but certainly it was a really great, really enjoyed the ways that you really weave together philosophy, a lot of psychology, anthropology, of course, some classic anthropology, some new, more cutting edge anthropological theories, religious studies, comparative religion, comparative literature, poetry. And so I guess my first question, and I don't mean this to be a softball question, but I mean, how did you, what made you want to write this? How did you come up with this kind of discussion and theoretical discussion about rethinking love and tourism. Sagar, wrote to you.
I was always interested in love, and as a child, I started thinking about love. And I was raised in a family which was studying the geography of tourism.
Hmm.
Both my parents are retired professors of geography, um, both involved in tourism, both PhDs in tourism.
Mhm.
My father, Professor TV Singh, was
Oh yeah, sure.
director of the Center for Tourism Research,
Hmm.
is still, and of course, he's quite old now.
Right. Very well
He
known. Yeah.
started the first course on tourism. So the urge to write about love started from, as you said, from the poetic angle at first.
Hmm. Okay.
But there was always a little bit of analysis as a BS, Bachelor of Arts student, or as a master's degree student. I was always interested in emotion, and especially because it was less talked about in anthropology. It seemed something that people were hedgy about. They did not want to talk about it because it seemed too pedantic, or
Hmm.
so too commercial, perhaps, because just as you were saying that Valentine's Day is only 2 days away. And
Right.
even in India, a lot of people are celebrating Valentine's Day these days. But at the same time, there is a growing realization, not only in the new generation, but in our previous generation as well, that a lot of commercialization of love has taken place.
Sure.
So I was always looking at love from the alternative viewpoint. So when I first fell in love as a teenager, I started analyzing it, and I was, let us say, a bit spiritually inclined. I
Right.
used to do meditation, so I started analyzing spirituality and love at the same time,
Hmm.
right at the time I was a teenager, and it gradually developed into a full-fledged occupation that did not bear fruit until I finally wrote this book. So this book is actually a culmination of lifetime of effort on thinking about love from all angles.
It's really
So
nice, and I love that you bring in. I mean, you have a whole chapter on religion and spirituality, and you of course tease out different forms of love. I guess one thing that really struck me at the very beginning, in terms of writing this book, in your introduction, you kind of say that one of the cardinal sins, or a sin of omission, in interdisciplinary tourism studies and in anthropology, is that we really don't talk about love and tourism. And I'm wondering if you could explain that a little bit more, because certainly there's a lot of literature in general on tourism, from, like you said, more of that kind of romantic love, or the deployment of emotions to kind of get what you want out of, let's say, sex tourism, or things like that. But just talking about meditation and everything, I mean, I'm thinking about wellness tourism and spiritual tourism, less pilgrimage, but even spiritual tourism. How especially in this COVID era, we're kind of really need to see that reconnection, because we're not with people as much anymore, people that we love. Um, I don't know. I mean, I guess people haven't been writing about that as much, and of course, this book came out before COVID. But what did you mean by that? We're committing a sin of omission by not studying the relationship of love and tourism.
this because as I studied who are called the classical anthropologists. For example, I was talking about Ashley Montagu, who was a
Mhm.
very learned and well-known anthropologist, and he talked about love and cooperation as being the same thing.
Mhm.
So what I found was that initially there was some leaning, or some um, uh, the anthropological gaze was directed towards cooperation and love, but somehow it got submerged in other studies. Of course, psychological anthropology developed in the 1950s,
Mhm.
and we hear about national character studies, we hear about the basic personality construct or the average personality construct. We read books on psychology and psychological anthropology, yet the first few books on psychology and anthropology again missed out on love. We have Margaret Mead writing about male and female, her magnum opus. And she talks about love, but she talks about love only first, only in the heterosexual sense. That's
Mhm.
fine with me. But only as far as it is concerned with adolescents in a few islands that
Yeah.
she studied, she concentrated on. So it is supposed to be a magnum opus of Margaret Mead, and she was one of the most brilliant and well-known American anthropologists. So she does talk about love, but she talks about parental love and the love of children in very few pages in the book.
Hmm.
So what I found was that there was an initial direction and initial interest in love and cooperation and the basic emotion of love, and that got submerged in uh, very academic things. As one of the researchers whom I have quoted in my book says, that somehow it was taboo. Talking about love was taboo.
Hmm.
So I wanted to bring this taboo thing back into focus, especially because as I started analyzing love as a teenager and experiencing love as a teenager, the girl I loved said, "Please don't try to analyze love. It is not to
Don't
be
analyze me.
analyzed."
My wife says that too.
I was afraid. It's not that I was an academic at that time, I was
Yeah.
just a questioning teenager. But I wanted to understand myself as well as how people think and how love changes to sometimes hate. One of the reasons why people say that love is not something to be studied because it gets mixed up with hate. People talk about love hate relationships. But as if you read this book, you'll find out that it is actually not the case. Love becomes politicized because even in Shakespeare, we read how love is dominated by politics and therefore gets submerged.
Yeah.
The real case of love is not presented. I wanted to present the case of love back to humans, who are one of the most loving of all the animals in the animal kingdom.
Hmm.
So that was my
Yeah.
main aim.
Yeah, that's great. So before I ask you, the next question is going to be what's your definition of love? Because it's clearly that it's not just eros, it's not just this. But before I begin, I forgot to tell everyone in the audience, as a webinar, this isn't, you can't be seen or heard. Your cameras are off. But after this first half hour, we're going to have a question and answer period where I can bring you up and elevate you to a panelist, and you can ask your questions. But in the meantime, if you see below, if you have questions for Sagar or for me, there's a Q&A, there's a chat, and then there's also Q&A button. Send your questions into the Q&A, and I'll be reading them and I'll be monitoring them. So send them whenever you have, whenever you're thinking of something. And then in the Q&A period, I'll go through and start to call on you and things like that. And of course, you could utilize the chat as well if you have comments, other comments. But really, the Q&A would be where I'm going to be looking for the questions. So sorry to cut off. This was a great kind of conversation we were going through. So there's a lot of different ideas of love, and we have talked a little bit about romance, about teenage romance, about Margaret Mead and coming of age in Samoa. And yet at the same time, like you said, there's this overhanging commercialization of kind of this concept of romantic love. Of course, there's also commercialization of tourism in general. So I think that's an obvious link. But when I first proposed to you to even have this on February 12th, you were a little ambivalent about having it so close to Valentine's Day because, and I think
Yeah.
rightly so, most of the book is not about romantic love. It's about lots of different other forms of love. Can you kind of like tell us about the different kinds of forms that you're talking with? And of course, it's really good because for the most part, they're broken down a little bit in each of the chapters without saying it. Each of the chapters kind of focus on a different kind
Yeah.
of love and how it's related to tourism.
Um, I won't consult I have my book at my side, but I won't be consulting it. Just
No,
a brief.
I just
Essentially,
like holding
five
it up
types of
because
love.
my tie matches. So that's the only reason why I'm holding it up is that we have nice matching thing. But no, sorry. Go on.
There is a sociologist called Lee who has analyzed the conjugal love. So he divided love, defined four types of love,
Mhm.
and then eight subtypes of from arising from those four basic types of love. I have used it in a very different form because I essentially have touched briefly on the four or five types of love. The first is that we meet in everyday life, because in everyday life, as we recognize this easily, we are not in love all the time. We
Hmm.
don't, nor are we falling in and out of love all the time. We just moving about, loving people whom we are close contact with, our friends or family, especially a nuclear family, or uh, the family of, as sociologists call, the family of orientation and the
Hmm.
family of procreation. These are the two families and members whom we love the most, and then our kins people, people who are our kin, and our friends. So it is really a different sort of love, which is classified as pragmatic, pragmatic, dealing with ordinary day things, realistic.
Hmm.
Then there is storge. That is another
Yeah.
common type of love. Storge is companionate, affectionate love. Companionate and affectionate love are even of the type that you feel for, um, let us say, music stars, stars in the pop music stars, for example.
Hmm.
But then, of course, you have some passion associated with that kind of love. So in my book, I have called it storge demophilius. Demophilius being the Greek word for popular.
Hmm.
So essentially, these are the two common types of love, pragma and storge. But there is another type of love which has a bearing on spirituality, and that general vast feeling of love, that wakens up your whole being, which is called agape. That's
Yeah.
also a Greek word. Agape is really altruistic, and extremely social kind of love.
Hmm.
It is also the basis of spiritual love. And the other types of love which I have not discussed in detail are eros, which has to do with eroticness, eroticism, sorry.
Hmm.
Then there is ludus, the playful kind of love. If you recall the special issue of on the anthropology of tourism brought out by Annals of Tourism Research back in 1983, um, Professor Nelson Graben had talked about Homo ludus.
Hmm.
So liminoid, when we talk about liminoid aspects of tourism, ludus is involved. That is playful love. It
Hmm.
is free of commitment. It is playful. So these are the essential types of love that I have discussed.
Right.
But
A-
I've
and
also
yeah,
talked
sorry.
about, yes.
No, no, I was just
If
going to say, the
I have
ludus, the homo ludens and all that seem to be the one that connects most with tourism, but I think that you expand that and you kind of talk about how all of these agape and storage, they all kind of trickle into to, to tourism
tourism,
as a process.
yes.
Yeah. How does that work?
If you see the way people generally behave towards tourists behave towards other tourists,
Hmm.
you will see that it is like companionate kind of love or affection or feeling for other tourists, especially if they belong to the same nationality,
Hmm.
or if they arrive from the same cultural region, because there is an affinity to tourists of the same originating region, or to people whom tourists connect with. So these types of love are usually storge and not ludus. Ludus was Homo ludens, and
Right.
ludus, this kind of love, was talked about in detail because tourists seem to be operating in the initial phases at the peripheries of civilization,
Yeah. Okay.
especially peripheries of Western civilization, and they seem to be without rules and therefore classified as anti-structure initially. As I have argued in my book, uh, tourism is uh, something that an activity that goes towards the peripheries, but it makes those peripheries part of the known.
Hmm.
It makes the unknown known,
Hmm.
and therefore the reason why there's not any anti-structure is because there is no structure. There are different civilizations acting. For example, Western people in Asia, people from Europe or America and Asia, They are from two different types of civilization. One is the Euro-American civilization, and the other is Asian civilization as a whole. I'm talking in a very general terms, of course,
Sure, sure.
because Asia is very vast. So what happens is that the anti-structure and structure things that does not come into being. So the question of liminality and playfulness is not really so much so these days. If you think of sun, sea, sand, sex tourism, definitely ludus is involved. But in usual cultural tourism, there is no ludus involved. In ethnic tourism, there is no ludus involved. In adventure tourism, there is ludus, but it is not ludus of the type referred to originally in the anthropology of tourism.
Mm-hmm.
So I have tried to make these different words part of the general vocabulary of love and tourism.
Hmm. Well, yeah, talking about anti-structure, another thing I was thinking about is, of course, this comes up most with Victor Turner, and I did. You're using liminality, and of course he talked about pilgrimage, and it is a very, I've written a lot on his own stuff, in general. I mean, I really love the ideas, of communitas and everything. Of course, it is very contested. John Eade and others have contested those ideas. But one way that I think we can also contest it is the fact that it seems that it is, like you said, a very almost Western idea where you're separating out, culturally, we separate out, religion and spirituality from, the profane, the sacred and the profane, love from not hate and things like that. There's these binaries that go on. Is that what you're, in a way, what you're saying? Is that what you're seeing there?
Yeah. What I am saying is that structure means social structure,
Right.
obviously. So social structure is that of a particular society. When you come out of the society and you become part of another society as a tourist, you are not creating something anti-structural in the sense that you're not obeying the rules of that society, agreed. But because you are at the periphery, there are no rules.
Right.
That is
Yes.
why tourism requires ethics, codes of conduct, because there are no rules. So it's not a question of anti-structure. There is no structure operating. The Western tourist social structure is not operating at the peripheries.
Mm-hmm.
What is operating is the host society's social structure. And there you may be contravening certain rules that they have. For example, tourists are castigated or criticized for being semi-naked at times, especially in Asian societies, or where there is a lot of wearing clothes properly and covering your body fully is very much part of the social norm.
Right.
What is happening, what I have discussed is how tourism is a form of society gathering knowledge about itself.
Okay.
Tourism is love of knowledge, as uh, Professor Alan Mashin in his book, The Beckoning Horizon, Making Sense of Tourism, also argues tourism is a quest for knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
knowledge of people, knowledge of places, knowledge of cultures, knowledge of nature, different types of nature, knowledge of languages. So it is a quest of knowledge. And therefore, one reason why we have to have tourism education and educate people about tourism is because we are making them better citizens of the world in the future.
Yeah.
So the point I'm driving is that uh, the question of anti-structure arises only in the society in which you are born in, or in which to which you belong. So what is actually happening is, as tourism is expanding and people from one civilization are going to visit countries that are part of other civilizations, a worldwide societal structure, I wouldn't call it social structure, a worldwide societal structure is coming about, which has to have new rules.
Yeah. I
New
absolutely agree.
rules.
Do you see, actually, this is
So
funny because I used to, I've gotten into some debates with some colleagues about this earlier on in my career. I really was talking, I liked to talk about, like, tourism as a global cultural form, is what I've said before. Like, there seems to
yes,
be some sort of broader, like you're saying, it's because society is coming together, because tourism is global, we are necessarily merging and interacting with each other's new norms, new values are kind of having to come together, right? And so that it might create a different type of culture. Obviously, it's not supplanting local cultures, but that there's a culture of tourism, or as the Lexington books description of the series says, cultures, because people have called me on it, that there may be multiple broader forms of cultures. Do you see that? Is that what you're driving at? Do you see that is happening as well?
Yes, I have defined, in fact, tourism in my book from the viewpoint of acculturation as well as culture contact. Because when ex-colonial peoples come to visit people who were formerly the the, subjugated people, whatever you want to call it, uh, it is a case of culture contact. For example, the British coming to India on a regular basis, it is a case of culture contact, not so much of acculturation. But acculturation is also taking place due to tourism.
Yeah,
And I have defined in my book tourism as a force for globalization as well as localization. So it is actually a social process of globalization. So definitely a global culture with a global societal structure is coming about, but it is happening very gradually. And what is required are rules, codes of ethics, codes of conduct, and once again, coming back to the book, a feeling of love for the people whom you visit, something which can be inculcated in students, in researchers, in even practitioners of and administrators of tourism, because very frequently there is antagonism between sometimes residents who are getting the brunt of the negative impacts of tourism versus those people in the host society who are actually involved in tourism business and who don't look in a negative way at tourism. And then there are the tourists themselves. Sometimes, as I found out, tourists do not like the natives. As I found, as I did a small pilot survey, which is print and is part of the book. It is in a few pages. I found that most people whom I questioned through the questionnaire seem to be saying that they would like to buy souvenirs, but they're not especially concerned whether buying those souvenirs are helping the locals or not. They'll buy the souvenirs if the souvenirs are good, or if they feel like uh, taking something back, some memories back
So it's
home
still more
to show the
self-interested.
friends.
Yeah. So do you see that there's
Yes,
a
even
need?
though one of the questions was, do you think that there is brotherly love in tourism?
Yeah.
So a lot of people, a number of people, more than half the people said yes, there is brotherly love in tourism. Yet they do not want to help the natives. So this is a paradox.
Yeah.
People say something and this is very common in anthropology, because anthropologists have always found out that studied people sometimes say something else and do something else. What they say and what they do are different things at times. Frequently it happens. So it happens with tourists also. So yes, different types of travel cultures are emerging, and that is why my theory of tourism is involved with the theory of needs, as I
Yes.
have evolved it. The basic, the essential philosophy, or not the philosophy, let's say the concept of needs and culture, and how cultures and societies take care of individuals' needs, was formulated by Malinowski back in the 1930s
Yeah.
or 40s.
All my
I
students,
developed this
see, we
further.
just studied this. All my students
I
here.
I evolves into a clarification of needs, wants, and demand, because I see that even those who are studying tourism economics frequently do not differentiate between needs and wants. And so I've talked about uh, basic needs, derived needs, then basic wants, not basic wants, derived wants, and then demand. And demand is what is channelized and advertised and commercialized want. The example that I've given is that people like drinking lemonade. If you make lemonade at home and want it every time instead of water, which can fulfill the need as well, then that is a want. But once you want a particular brand of lemonade, then that is demand. So
Mm.
we need to differentiate between needs and demand. And in the case of tourism as well, it happens because there are some types of tourism which cater to the basic needs of a person. And these needs are not just the personal needs in the sense that they are socially derived needs.
Right.
They are psychological needs, linguistic needs,
Mhm.
spiritual needs. There are uh, you see societal needs and social needs. I differentiate between social and societal needs because there are some things that society wants, but does not itself recognize that it wants those things. For example, societal marketing as different from social marketing. Social marketing is about giving people those things that they need, but which are frequently not advertised commercially.
Mhm.
But societal advertising and marketing is about those things which people don't realize they want, or which cannot possibly be commercially marketed or advertised. For example, social tourism.
Mm.
Social tourism is not marketed, but there is a need for social tourism. There are a lot of people who are underprivileged, who do not have money enough to go on a travel holiday, on travel during the holidays, but
Mhm.
they need tourism as well. And of course, tourism has itself become a need, and something that satisfies people's different sorts of needs. So in my book, I've tried to link this with evolution, how in fact that tourism fulfilling these needs allows adaptation to different sorts of environments all over the world, not just geographical but also ecological environments and habitats.
Mhm.
So yes, coming back to the original question, yes, there are different types of travel cultures, different types of tourists, but they are not homogenized in the sense that if you talk about mass tourism, then mass tourism is not really a homogeneous thing.
Right.
It is divided into so many types of tourism. For example, you talk about mass ecotourism. You can talk about mass ethnic tourism. It is happening these days.
Mhm.
So, how do we differentiate between these types? We have to come back to the question of needs and wants. Some types of tourism fulfill basic needs, some wants, and some types of tourism are those that have been created. Demand has been created for those types of tourism. All these together lead to human evolution and tourism evolution.
Do these different needs and wants and desire and demands of tourism's producing these different things, do they map onto different types of forms of love? I'm thinking, for example, the storge, for example, this kind of charisma, this kind of, it seems more about a desire, um in a way of something that's high in one's conscious, like in one's awareness, versus
Yes,
something more like agape, which is this love, brotherly love
yes,
kind of thing. Is that what you're saying?
definitely. Spiritual tourism. Uh, you see, I have tried to differentiate between the two aspects of tourism: the
Hmm.
spiritualistic aspect and the ritualistic aspect.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I have argued that in the book that uh, most of tourism has both of these aspects, spiritualistic as well as ritualistic. Weekend
Right.
tourism is a form of ritual, but going what is called as new age tourism, or going on long holidays, say somebody from America going USA going to Machu Picchu in South America, which is one of the meccas of new age tourism, is a kind of spirituality. So when people go to these places, they have a different sort of mindset. When people go on volunteer tourism, they have a different mindset. Of
Right.
course, it has been argued recently that a lot of volunteer tourism is also about fulfilling your own personal needs, not
It's
so
true.
much altruistic. But it definitely does have an altruistic aspect to it, because when you go to, say, uh, somebody from Britain goes to, or Europe goes to Nepal and starts teaching English or mathematics, or gets involved in some local project for, let us say, for example, building a small dam, or making biogas plant, teaching people how to make biogas plants for fulfilling their fuel needs. So those things are altruistic. So that kind of altruism is not always agape. It can also be storge, because
Mhm.
it is companionate. It is not only selfless and altruistic and spiritualistic, but it is also companionate. You feel that the natives are not natives and to be looked down upon, but that they're fellow humans. And that is where, of course, the whole question of love comes in. The more tourists feel that they are visiting fellow humans and not some objects. For example, some people said that the zoo, it's something like a human zoo. So it's not like
Yeah,
that anymore. Tourists are also evolving because we are evolving.
sure.
I think the whole argument of the book is that tourism is not them, they're us. We are tourists,
Yep.
we are hosts, we are the researchers, and we are the persons whom other people are researching as well. So we are all tourists now, and therefore we should build values, of which love is a very important value.
Right. I mean, it's really great. It's a really great point. And that's why I love thinking about tourism and teaching tourism, because everyone at some point has been a tourist, and I even have students in my tourism class, have to go around and take a campus tour, what they see every day, and just the shift of the tourist gaze, a different eye, you're seeing and experiencing it differently. So in that case, yeah, I guess there is this sort of a universality in that we can understand and we're kind of merging together. The question that as you're talking about this, I keep thinking of this story, this thing that happened to me once. I was a tour operator for many years before going and doing my PhD, working in Italy, but also in Asia, especially in Cambodia. And I remember there was this one old crotchety man, I would take these more wealthier educational tourists on like alumni trips and things like that. And when I took them to Cambodia one year, there's this older man who was quite, we did Vietnam, Cambodia. He lived through the Vietnam War. These not people he wanted to even visit. There's a different idea of these people. Certainly not agape going on in his mind. But at the same time, he had a younger wife that really wanted to go, and so he was doing it out of love to go and humor her, kind of, and take her on this trip. But when we got to Cambodia, he hearing the story of one of our guides, this younger female guide, talking about the Khmer Rouge, her life as a child under the Khmer Rouge.
Yes.
He really, I mean, it was a very interesting transformation that he had. I mean, he was saying kind of not very nice things about the people he was seeing in most of these places because of the wartime kind of experience that he had. But when he got there and he was able, after, and this was at the end of the trip, after 2 weeks, he sort of changed a little bit, and he wanted to sponsor her to come to America, which of course she didn't want to do. But that in itself was ethnocentric. Let me take you away from this horrible place, which it's not horrible at all. But but I saw a transformation. I saw a different
Yes.
kind of what you're saying, a kind of a love, that happened there, at least temporarily, or some sort of affect, some sort of feeling. And so I'm wondering, can you be drawn to the place out of one form of love or something? Volunteer tourism is almost more of a love of self, perhaps, in fulfilling your own needs, right? But is this a function of time that you might get closer to people the more you spend in this place that you can create, can the love transform? I mean, we certainly see this, my love for my wife and my children evolves over time as well, from when we were first dating to many years later now, can that go on in tourism as well?
Yes. I would divert the direction of the flow of the conversation a bit.
Sure.
I have talked about the 10 love languages. Gary Chapman is a marriage counselor, a very well known marriage counselor. He has talked about the 5 love languages.
Mm-hmm.
And I've discussed the 5 love languages with reference to tourism. A love language is not really a language, a separate language. It is a form of expression, and it is a universal form of expression we find in almost all cultures. For example, gift giving is, if you recall, Marcel Mauss, the French anthropologist, had written a called The Gift,
Mm-hmm.
and he talked about the importance of the gift in all cultures, gift giving in all cultures. A lot of work in anthropology has been concerned with gift giving, especially what is known as the Indian gift, and so on. So anyway, so gift giving is an expression of love. Similarly, a second love language is physical touch. Physical touch is not necessarily sex, but
Mm-hmm.
patting somebody on the back when
Sure.
he or she does something right,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
which gives a lot of mental support,
Mm-hmm.
psychological support to a person. Then there's quality time, things that we are now looking into because of the COVID pandemic, where there are fewer chances of going out on a travel holiday. So even if there are staycations, people can spend quality time. And I quote a study which found that in the Netherlands, that when people were given a 4-day week instead of a 5-day work week, they spent more time, more quality time with their families. But it did not necessarily mean that they engaged in more tourism. So anyway,
Mm-hmm.
these are three love languages: gift giving, physical touch, quality time. Then there is acts of service. If you look at the difference between, in general, this is a big generalization, but it happens. I have frequently found this to be true. Look at the way women work in families. They, as mothers, as wives, as sisters, as daughters, they contribute so much to the family. They work so much. They
Mm-hmm.
cook, they clean, they do so many things that men don't do or frequently don't like doing. So those are acts of service, and
Mm-hmm.
this is a form of expression of love. That is the
Mm-hmm.
fourth love language. And the fifth is this words of affirmation. This words of affirmation, such as talking to the person, confirming the love that yes, I do love you. How are you? Hello, honey. How are you?
Mm-hmm.
Love you so and so. See the kind of talk that, and the small talk that goes on. That is, and other ways of expressing love in verbal form. That those are uh, uh, words of affirmation.
Mm-hmm.
So I have added five more types of love languages in which people in tourism express themselves. One is tourism itself. Going on a travel holiday is a form of love expression. I can vouch for this because
Sure.
as a child, I always wanted to go on a holiday, on a travel holiday every time there were holidays. And whenever we proposed to our parents, let's go to such and such place, and they agreed, maybe not the same place, but some other place,
Yeah.
we were so full of joy. So it is a form of expression of love, going on a holiday.
Absolutely.
Then there are other forms of expression of love, for example, self talk, talking to yourself to get yourself out of the mental
Yeah.
wrangles,
That's true.
the,
Yeah.
the entanglements of the mind that prevents one from loving another person more freely, more openly. Then let's say the self talk is also important for your self love, because I have, as I've emphasized in the book, self love is also important. If you do not know or do not allow yourself to love yourself, then you will find it difficult to love somebody else.
Sure.
Self recognizing the self, giving yourself a pat on the back, that is part of self talk. Then one more form of love language is love talk, that is talking about, remember how the time we went for a
Mm.
stroll in the forests, remember the
Yeah.
time I
Bring it up.
presented you with a gift, remember the time we went
Yeah.
to the movies together.
Mm-hmm.
Or, and so there is, these are the 10 love languages that I've talked about in the book. And these are ways in which one can develop love. So the transformation that you were talking about, coming back to the, it was a bit long winded, but coming back to what you were saying, Transformation and evolution of the person comes about when you realize yourself, how you love, how to express your love to the other person. That is very important.
The
And
natural,
transformation comes about through tourism. Through
right.
tourism, there are some books which have been published on. I've contributed myself to the book, one of these books, Transformative Tourism, Host Perspectives.
Mhm.
So transformational tourism is a form of change that comes about due to tourism. It is part of the way the psychological needs of are met through tourism, and that allows us to change.
Right.
Then, of course, there's one more theory that I've talked about in the book. It is called ABC theory,
Hmm.
affective balance capacity theory. That is, that tourists as well as residents, tourists, pilgrims, as well as residents,
Hmm.
they try to balance out. It is not like social exchange theory. It is a kind of effective balance that one seeks, because it is kind of what you say, personality homeostasis that one seeks.
Right.
The negative feelings about tourism versus the positive feelings about tourism, the positive emotions, which is love about tourism, and the negative emotions. We try to balance these things out, and that is why we have different attitudes towards tourism, both of residents as well as of tourists.
Mm.
But what happens is that as you seek balances and how much you like a particular destination, what you dislike about a particular destination, you come back to liking some destinations more, some destinations less,
Mm.
and therefore you have repeat tourism.
Right.
So it's called ABC, effective balance capacity theory.
Yeah.
So
ABC.
yes, transformation comes about. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
Right.
So we're pretty much out of time to talk because we have some great questions that are coming up. The one thing though I'm sorry to a couple of my students who actually have the same question, so I'm gonna kind of summarize it. Um, is this issue that we're talking a lot about how love manifests itself, the different needs, the different hierarchies of needs. As an anthropologist, especially, we know that. These things take culture is diverse across the world, and that it takes
Yes.
it's built of different kinds of norms and values and worldviews. We've talked a lot about very universal sort of things, like these are the 10 ways that love is expressed. Do you see, though, where does culture fit in, and how cultural diversity, I mean, I know that I'm not being very articulate, but do all cultures um express love in the same way? I mean, this is what a lot of people are saying. um how do we make sense of this? How do we make sense of this?
Yes. I have talked about this in my book. I've given the example of how expression of emotions is allowed or not allowed. It's what Daniel Goleman in Emotional Intelligence, the book Emotional Intelligence, talks about masking. Masking of expressions of emotion also happens, but it is culturally relevant. For example, um, Japanese people, I would say, Japanese men love their wives, and Japanese women love their men as much as anybody else in any other culture. But in some cultures, expression of love is restricted or is not allowed by tradition,
Hmm.
or it is allowed later on in life. In Japanese, according to Karandashev, the research by Karandashev, in Japanese culture, it is only towards later half of life,
Hmm.
married life, that you're allowed to express love for your spouse. So expression of love is restricted by cultures, and it happens in different ways. That's why, as I said in the beginning, I was talking about especially Western society when I was talking about the 10 love languages. But there are three love languages which are universal: gift giving, which is talked about by Marcel Mauss as well. Physical touch happens in all societies and all cultures, and acts of service. Acts of service are can be said to be universal,
Hmm.
but definitely the way cultures allow expression of love may vary. But the thing is, when we come talk about tourism, tourism as a form of love or a love language, then that is not a universal in the same way
Right.
that gift giving is a universal.
Sure.
For example, hunting for sport tourism is found in tribal societies, but hunting for sport tourism is also found in Western societies. For example, the colonial rulers in India used to do a lot of shikar. Used to be called shikar, going on a shikar. They used to hunt the tiger, sometimes the elephant, or in Africa, the lion has been hunted. So that is not from an ethical point of view, from the viewpoint of animal ethics, it
Right.
is not something very good, but it happens. So there are some forms of tourism which are universal. So, for example, volunteer tourism is something quite Western in of origin.
Yeah.
But VFR tourism, visiting friends and relatives tourism, is a universal. So, and that is how what I have talked about in the book, how kinship ties and social bonding are channelized through through the personality, and how certain expressions of personality are allowed in different types of cultures. For example, telling love stories is found universally, almost universally,
Hmm.
in tribal, rural, as well as Western cultures. So there are some aspects of tourism which are common. There's some aspects of love which are common, uh, but the expression of love is hindered in the sense that some traditional cultures do not allow free expression of love. But let me go back to a very old anthropologist, Malinowski. Even he admits in studying the Trobriand Islanders that uh, parents are notoriously lax in dealing with the children. By lax, he means that they actually love the children. So parental love, love of children by parents, and love of parents by children is something that is universally found.
Sure, and it
So
does find, and
expression of love,
yeah,
yes,
expressing
expression of
love for
love,
children is a great example. Who, how much do you do corporal punishment? Does that show you love them any less or anything? It's a different cultural, kinds of ideals. Yeah, absolutely. So we have, I mean, I want to get to quite, we have some great questions here. I want to end with one more question of mine before, because it really, you were hitting on VFR tourism and all that other stuff. Um, pandemic, the pandemic, we've seen a lot of manifestations of this, what we've been talking about today. From, on the one hand, we have the fact that we can't travel as much. I mean, my parents are in another state, only 2 hours away, but really we don't really see each other because you're supposed to quarantine and get tests to go from state to state. So the VFR kind of travel, I'm not saying that that's necessarily tourism, but that has been, a problem. And so that's been a problem for lots of different kinds of love. My friends I can't see. But on the other hand, there are also, love is being deployed, especially romantic love or VFR love, in movements trying to open up the travel industry again. There's a thing which we were talking about yesterday. Remember, there's a movement called what is it? What was it? Love, not tourism. Saying travel for love cannot be tourism, and so it's an essential travel, not a frivolous kind of travel, which we know tourism is not necessarily frivolous. And so you should allow, for the free movement of people again, even during the virus. What do you see, as a final question of mine, and then we'll get to other people. What do you see as kind of how COVID is affecting what you have written about, since you did write about it beforehand?
as I said yesterday, I would repeat it, that the pandemic is polarizing people in different ways. People are Some people are going towards exotic natural areas where they expect very few people to be there, and so they are supposedly safe. And some people are, despite the pandemic and despite the restrictions, social distancing, they are not maintaining social distancing. They are mixing up on New Year parties. Uh, in Himachal Pradesh in India, there is a new tunnel which has been opened near Kulu and Manali, and people just clogged that tunnel, started dancing and drinking inside the tunnel on New Year's Eve. So the pandemic is affecting different people in different ways, as is quite natural because there are different types of personality. And essentially, as I said yesterday, there are two types of people: those who think they can get away with coronavirus, that it will not kill them, and therefore they risk going out, mixing with people, and forgetting about social distancing.
Mm-hmm.
And there would be this would include some people who are interested in culturally exotic places. But essentially, there are two types of people: those who think that the pandemic is can be contained, this is a part is a timely thing, it is going to end soon. And those who are very circumspect about it, and who are caregivers, who are concerned about the elderly people whom they live with in their house and in their homes, and because of which they do not venture out at all,
Right.
or they opt for staycations. So the polarization is first towards natural areas or towards cultural areas, and the other is mixing up, and that is garrulous and people who are congregating in masses, and
Right.
those who are going towards areas which are where you can be spaced out and can prevent the pandemic from spreading further.
Mm-hmm.
But there is one negative point which I must emphasize. uh, Love not only for humans, of humans for humans, but of humans for animals as well, because of zoonosis. Zoonosis
Mm.
is the spread of diseases, including COVID, from humans to animals and from animals back to humans.
Right.
And this can happen, and a lot of mammalian species may be in danger because of the pandemic.
Mm. Yeah.
So we have to be we have to people are going to find innovative new ways to deal with the pandemic. They're going to invite people on special packages where they are found, give big discounts. For example, the Taj group of hotels is offering a big discounts on 7 day stays at the hotel. So the question is not about whether tourism is good or bad, but about this thing that, on the one hand, tourism can have negative effects, both physically and from the viewpoint of social cultural effects.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, tourism provides jobs, and there are some 250 million jobs at stake because of the restrictions of the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the other thing that I was thinking of, I'm bringing up two people who have asked questions that are similar in terms of kind of the pandemic and travel and staycations and things. One other thing I wanted to point out, I think we were talking about in the last when we were chatting before, was this idea that there's also a hierarchy of needs and in terms of and hierarchy of loves that play out in the pandemic. I mean, we were talking. You got me thinking yesterday about the fact that there's one love perhaps for fellow people, for fellow sight. I know I have Shuja, for example, said, when I return to India, it's for my love of the country and of course, and of Sagar and everything. Love tourism in essence, right? Which is absolutely true. But then there's that other love of, well, I don't want to travel because I don't want to make them sick or potentially to make them sick. And so
Yes.
like ethics in general, you have to start balancing and weighing out different kinds of loves as well. So, I mean, this is really a fascinating talk. If please keep sending some questions in the chat. I'm sorry we went long, but it was just you really, there's a lot packed in there, and so I didn't want to cut you off. But Moji and Klaus had some questions. Moji, maybe you wanted to ask yours if you're there. Are you there?
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Awesome.
Yes.
So my question is a little bit different. I'm glad I attended this, but I wasn't expecting all these awesome thought-provoking discussions. I was wondering how Sagar sees vacations helping the love of couples, just spending time outside their usual environment, doing stuff together in rather routine ways, how that might help, just not with related to other people at that destination, but just related to that certain group or couple traveling together.
Good. Yeah, great.
Yeah, it's a question of one of the expression of the love languages, quality time. As I gave the example of the Netherlands and how reducing 5-day work week to 4-day work week allowed people, those who were working, to spend more of quality time with the loved ones. Similarly, staycations these days, well, they won't balance with something like tourism, going out to a destination and expressing love there. The example that I've given in the book is, see, there are the love languages, the expression of love is primary and secondary. You can have 2 love languages or even 3 love languages, but one of them is more or less your primary love language. Some people feel physical touch is more of their love language. So some people in couples express more sexually or through touch. Some people express themselves through acts of service. So quality time is one of the expressions of love. And when you go on a tour with your loved one, for example, if a couple goes on a tour and you go to a restaurant at a destination and you want to express love, and you take an outing to a restaurant in a tourist place, it is quite different from the way what happens to you when you go to a restaurant in your own home city, in your hometown. And then, but what I have, of course, emphasized is that when you engage in tourism and want to express your love, it is easier to do that because you can combine several love languages. For example, you can go to a restaurant and present the loved one with flowers, or maybe a book that was she or he was searching for all the time, and which you happen to find in a bookstore in a tourist destination. That happens. Or maybe you present a engagement ring to the loved one in a special setting in a tourist destination. That enhances the love expression. So yes, balancing staycations with a couple going on tourism, on a tour and to a destination, uh, it is not the same thing. Definitely people want to go on tours and they want to travel. They want to be tourists much more. It has become part of what the culture is nowadays, not just in the West, but also in Asian countries. There's so many millions of Chinese and millions of Indians going abroad. So when people want to travel so much, it is what I've classified as they have become compulsive tourists. It is a kind of compulsion, and that is one of the reasons why people are going out, say going to Goa. Goa, it was is very popular amongst Indian tourists as well as foreign tourists from Britain, Europe, Russia. And till Christmas, there were very few tourists going to Goa this last year. But suddenly, on the New Year, people just burst out. They just spread out all over the beaches of Goa. They just forgot there was a pandemic.
Yeah.
So yes,
Pent up.
restricting yourself is very difficult.
Sure.
Holding
Sure.
yourself back is quite difficult.
Sure. Yeah. I know. I see Klaus is up. You had a couple questions. How you doing? You want to ask that because it comes on. It kind of merges, fuses with that. And then Matthias, I'm gonna have you come up if that's okay. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for your presentation. My question is, like, in your definition, what is the difference between like travel and tourism in that case? And yeah, okay, this is question number one. And yeah, another question is what does digital transformation has an effect on your research right now?
I'm sorry. Could you please repeat the question? Please repeat the question, please.
Yes. First question is like, how do you define the margin from travel and tourism in your definition? And
Right.
second,
Yes.
yeah. And second question
tourism,
is like,
yes. Yes,
like, how does digital transformation affects your research like now?
Sure, and I would even say, you know, especially in this immobile time, largely immobile time, how is the digital realm affecting, you know, how we express our love in travel and things like that? I think good questions.
Yes. Uh, First, the differentiation between travel and tourism, the margin between travel and tourism. Um, Tourism is these days especially built around the tourism industry. Travel is as far back as 5,000 years ago, pre-Roman times, in the Harappan times, Indus Valley civilization. I was doing research on that and found that people from Japan, from China used to visit India. People even from Arabic countries used to visit India. It was not India, it was just the Harappan civilization. So from the analysis of the script, it seems that this travel for trade, or even for travel for pleasure and travel at leisure, is as old as 5,000 years ago. It's not just the past 200 years of since Thomas Cook invented the mass holiday. So travel includes VFR tourism that all people engage in, whether we are from Africa, whether we are from Asia, whether we are from Europe. Uh, Visiting friends and visiting relatives are two different types of tourism, in fact, but they are more of travel than tourism, in the sense that they are not commercially oriented. People do use commercial facilities when they go on visiting relatives or visiting friends. For example, if I go to Bombay, I might meet a friend there, but I would want to go to a restaurant, so I would be using the same facilities, same amenities as a tourist who has come from, let's say, UK. But yes, and travel always includes pilgrimage, which is in some ways different from tourism, in the sense that pilgrimage is also organized just as much as tourism is organized. But the ethics of pilgrimage varies from civilization to civilization, whereas tourism is concerned, it is a developing tourism culture developed by the tourism industry, developed by travel cultures of different people. It is an evolving culture. Pilgrimage is established as it is a very age-old thing. It can go back to thousands of years. So that is the first part, first answer to the first question. The second question: how does the digital age affect tourism? That, of course, the first way it can positively affect tourism is that you can engage in virtual travel. Only today on Facebook, a friend of mine introduced her students to a visit to Rome. It was all arranged through videos, including from the film A Roman Holiday, in the old film, Hollywood film, A Roman Holiday. So she included videos and images of Rome for her students. So virtual travel is possible through the digital age. Secondly, artificial intelligence is affecting the way digital the software influences tourism, and there I'm afraid that the effect of love has been not so pronounced, because artificial intelligence till now has not been able to inculcate deep emotion as part of it.
Mhm.
Artificial intelligence till now does not involve so much of emotion. It is unable to capture emotion, which is an essential part of the tourist experience. So yes, digitally, tourism is being affected. More and more people are being greeted by robots, chatbots, talking to chatbots through their smartphones, arranging for menus of what they would like at a tourist destination, what kind of food they would like.
Mhm.
But the upshot is that uh, tourism is becoming more technology oriented, and that is bringing about something of an alienation.
Yeah.
This is at least my reading.
Yeah.
Some sort of alienation, because the social aspect is becoming less and less, and becoming more and more digitalized.
Mhm.
So I hope
Yeah.
that answers your question.
And like the term staycation, is that a very new term? Or what is the origin?
It's a recent, not a very recent term. The term itself has been used since the 1990s. You
Mhm.
stay at a place and have a vacation. So you stay and have a vacation, staycation. Half of stay and the full word stay and vacation.
All
So
right.
that is, it is in a way the opposite of what are called digital nomads nowadays. People who are tourists but who work while they are on a tour at a tourist destination. They stay there and work from far off, remote work. So it is in a way the opposite of digital nomadism.
Mhm.
Staycation, staying put at a particular place and enjoying a vacation. What we used to do when we were children, because we did not always have the opportunity to go on a tour in every holiday.
Yeah.
So, and I think it is true for most people. Uh, Everybody cannot afford a travel holiday all the time. So, staycation is emphasis on quality time.
The other thing too, just to put in my 2 cents, the pandemic has obviously increased the amount of the staycations and things like that. Um, but I'm finding almost that it's almost cultivating a better love of your neighborhood, of your neighbors, things that we didn't have. I mean, we've seen this a lot, and I've been in a number of webinars. I've seen in my own neighborhood, where I didn't know half my neighbors for many years. I've lived there, but being forced to kind of stay and not be as vastly mobile. We were doing much more explorations, micro explorations of our neighborhood and everything else, meeting new people or meeting your neighbors and having more quality time. So in a way, it's like
Yes.
micro tourism. These staycations can actually create this maybe agape or other forms of kind of love that you were talking about. So I do see that is maybe something that has been enhanced during the pandemic. We're running long, and so thank you for those who are still here. I did bring a couple people up who have asked questions. We'll just go around. Matthias, you've been hanging out for a while, so thank you. Do you want to ask your question?
Yes.
Sure.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I apologize for eventually a bad connection, but if you hear me, then it's fine. First of all, congrats to this great book, a very important book. As you said,
Thank you.
a concept like love in the tradition of science is particularly excluded because of the Western tradition of what cannot be objectified, measured, and so forth, is of course hardly to be an object of science.
Mm-hmm.
Having said this, I'm very much interested how you see also your philosophical background from coming from the, so to speak, Asian philosophy or Buddhist view, holistic and not this dualist Aristotelian type of worldview, which in my eyes is extremely important to transcend. Otherwise, it is always difficult to bring love a priori into a particular category or form in order to, even in the worst case, control it or use it for reified, instrumentalized persons. So then this is my first part of the introductory question. And the next one is then even more relevant. How do you see this research as an agenda in the future vein of research, which I fully support in this holistic perspective? However, Putnam's record, meaning to transcend the dualism, how could we empower, especially also the supply side, in particular the so-called lifestyle entrepreneurs who are interested in something really, they know true love, what is the right. So for me, this connection to the emotional aspect and even the socio-communicative aspect, the linguistic aspect, to the ethics aspect, I think this is an extremely important one, because you cannot even love the wrong thing, as we might provocatively say, like you can even be malevolently be creative. It's not necessarily always So we really have to know what we mean with love. If the love is, as you rightly said, the empathetic, the remembrance of the caring, the service, the gift, the social orientedness, the others orientedness, then it's fine. But sometimes, especially in a bad vocabulary or in a world of with ideologies and so forth, love is even, the term might be abused and ideologized in the wrong way. So eventually we can talk about true love, or even this love to wisdom, as it was philosophically used by Socrates, and then also the old Asian philosophy. So how could we empower lifestyle entrepreneurs in their transformative, so to speak, important social work to make the world better? Thank you.
Yes.
Excellent.
So I would summarize what you said. The first is about lack of dualism, the importance of lack of dualism in a theory of love or recreation and leisure and tourism. Is that correct?
Yes, because I think
Yes. So I have, yes. So I have, in fact, let me quote from my book. I have opposed what some have talked about as psychological homeostasis as a definition of recreation with reference to tourism. And it says that Shivers, a particular researcher, has said that recreation is any consummatory experience, non-debilitating in character. And it says the unity of mind and body, psyche and soma, brought about at the time of consummation is recreation. Now I have, on the contrary, said that the mind body dualism is not part of Eastern philosophies at all. It is not to say that Eastern philosophies are superior, because phenomenology in Western science as well talks about lack of dualism and includes this lack of mind-body dualism. And so what I have defined recreation as a as a universal play, for example, play which is related to recreation and which is related to tourism, as a universal form of interaction between the individual and the social and the physical environment, in such a way that it promotes understanding of the social milieu and the physical world while providing recreation to the participants. Consequently, recreation can be defined as a universal form of mental and physical activity that helps in recreating the world as a particular culture sees it, leading to happiness in ways society suggests. So it is a very relativistic definition. So coming back to what you were saying about how can the supply side be enhanced, and how can we develop a philosophy of love which does not lead us into a blind end towards hate or towards malevolent ends. So the first part of that is, of course, that the book is talks about spirituality and tourism, and a spiritual aspect of tourism. Therefore, the spiritual aspect is necessarily positive, because spirituality has been defined by me in the book as something that provides lasting euphoria and happiness to a person, uh, and which connects a person to the society in positive ways. So love is something which is basic to spirituality. So the question is, of course, I have defined love in a very broad way in the book. I have adopted only a working definition, which is that love is something, uh, a very good feeling towards a person or thing, but a strong or pleasant feeling towards a person or thing. But I have subsequently refined my definition of love, and I would like to present it, if you allow me. It is: love is a strong and pleasant feeling for someone or something that can be sustained with sustained interaction with or psychological presence of that person or thing, and which leads to or and induces feelings of harmony and wellness. So now you can see that in this definition, I've introduced the terms harmony and wellness.
Yes.
So automatically, the negative feelings are not part of what I have defined as love.
Very interesting.
Secondly, the practical aspects of it, uh, which happens to include how tourism is involved in the definition of love. And that is, the absence of that loved person or thing can lead to reduced happiness, but which can be rectified by reintroducing a person or thing that induces feelings of harmony and wellness, or by agreed social interaction with loved persons, or creative pursuits such as writing, reading, hobbies, appreciation of or engagement in the arts, and interaction with the natural or cultural environment through tourism. So tourism is connected to love, definitely. When I say that love expression is tourism is a type of love expression, automatically I believe that the negative aspects are excluded.
Mhm.
The supply side of it can be uh, uh, thought of in terms of marketing. And I have talked about, if you read the book, about how the love languages can be used for marketing of tourism
Exactly.
instead of the commercial typical ways of marketing tourism, where, for example, demure natives are shown in the background of tropical beaches,
Sure.
uh, which are empty. And when actually you go there are no empty beaches, there are crowded beaches. Or, for example, the Great Wall of China, which is supposed to be empty when you see it in a tourist brochure, but when you get there, there is no room to even breathe properly.
So
So,
fact of
Saga,
tourist
thank,
imaginaries.
thank you so much for your very detailed
yes,
answer. I totally appreciate also, in particular, this repetitive communicative aspect which you mentioned. That is basically the communicative form you also had in your definition. Because here then also the tip for that, the gift expression, the positive spiral can also emerge then to repetitive communication, which is not a one-shot game, so to speak. This is
Cool.
also important. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much for this.
Thank
So we're really running out of time. I do want to have at least the three that are up here. If you still want to ask the question, maybe I'll ask Carmel. Let's maybe do a lightning round of questions very quickly here. But thank you. Yes. Hi.
Hi, greetings from Ireland. Fascinating talk.
Greetings.
I'm a sociologist, so apologies, not a tourism expert, and I work in the kind of area of families and love more generally. So I'm interested in your take about specifically love tourism and how tourism has changed love, or is tourism just commodifying love? So what's your broader interpretation of societal trends in terms of global love and fluid love and these changes in love, and how tourism is facilitating that process?
Great.
Yes, definitely. One of the reasons the book was written was because love is being commercialized and being equated with commercial, romanticized versions or sexuality, too much of sexuality. And that is one of the reasons why I found it necessary to write the book, to remind ourselves, and not just researchers but also practitioners, that love can be utilized as a tool to create harmony between people visiting people, the people that visit us, and that is the tourists versus the residents. There are a lot of antagonisms between residents and tourists, which were happening partly due to over tourism, what is called over tourism. So one way in which the book contributes to a different outlook towards love is that it shows that, for example, if you market or advertise um, a particular destination through the love languages, for example, instead of showing nakedness, if you emphasize how hospitality, true hospitality, is being provided at a destination, that is a way in which love is being expressed. So, and again, of course, it goes both ways. Uh, uh, if we educate people about love and tourism and about ethics in tourism and values of love and affection and caring for the people of other cultures, then there is all the more reason that we will be able to market tourism in such a way that the negative effects are minimized, if not done away with.
Hmm.
So that is one way in which love can affect the, the tourism product or
That's
products.
interesting. Very
So,
interesting.
yes.
Can I bring Birgit into this? You had commented you liked Carmel's question, and what was your question?
Actually, can you hear me at all? Yes, can you hear me? Great.
Yes.
I'm in Germany at the moment. I'm obviously enjoying this discussion immensely. Sagar and I have been following your work for quite some time. And I've actually published in intimacy theory and tourism and place perspective. So I'm very interested in your take on this. And I'm curious about your definition to start off with. I think we getting a little bit lost with regards to love. It's such a big term. Now, when we look at love from a positive psychology perspective, whether it's Frederickson or Seligman and so forth, we're looking at the emotional component which you are addressing. On the other hand, you're also referring to the needs theory by Maslow and so forth. And again, we have love in there right in the beginning or the center of that hierarchy. And thirdly, we have the notion of values, which is the value of love. So again, I think it's, for me, where I'm standing at the moment, listening to you, is, if we are talking the connection between love and tourism, what are we looking at when we talk about marketing? Is it the needs, is it the values, or is it the emotions? Emotions are being utilized for advertising and marketing. Needs and values refer back to the host societies and so forth, not just the tourists. And the values, again, whose values are we talking about? These are just my questions as far as definitional perspective is concerned.
Right, thank you. Yeah, and I would just add too, one of the things I asked Sagar even yesterday was, how are you using this different than affect, which people do write about?
That's right. Yeah.
And
Yes,
so maybe you want to say that.
Affect is concerned. Yes.
Thank you.
Affect,
Thank you.
The term affect is a general term as psychologists and as I have used it. Affect is a general term for emotions, feelings, and moods.
That's
so,
right.
The way psychologists differentiate between emotions and moods are that moods are longer lasting, but are more superficial than emotions. Emotions are triggered off. They are triggered off. Don't last very long, and they affect other emotions as well. And as far as love is concerned, the reason why I'm connecting love to values, to needs, is because from the anthropological point of view, it is a question of human values, universal human values.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it strange that love is a value that every society values. Love is the only socially sanctioned emotion, as far as I know. Pride, guilt, hate, envy, jealousy, these are also emotions or feelings, but they are not socially sanctioned. Pride may be, but pride is derived from love. When you feel proud of something, you feel proud of your son, of your husband or your wife. It is because of that basic emotion that is love. So love is a basic emotion. It is a need. Love is a need. And it is one of the primary needs of a person, in my view. I don't subscribe to so much to Maslow as to Malinowski, Bronislaw Malinowski, who talked about needs in a very different way from Maslow. Maslow, like Malinowski, does not place sex so much high on the hierarchy as love. But if you see the Maslow's pyramid of needs, hierarchy of needs, actualization is at the top.
Well,
and
actually,
that comes last.
Yes.
It comes last.
Yeah, self-trained sentence, I think, was the one that I was thinking of with a hierarchy, self-transcendence rather than self-actualization. The point that is actually not published in a lot of the academic textbooks, including business and so forth, where I come from, it finishes off with self-actualization. But the extended hierarchy is actually self-transcendence, which is the care component, which is looking at others. So I think that's what I'm trying to figure out, how you link that to the needs perspective. That's where I was coming from, just to put that in there. Sorry.
And we just had a question about that too, right? That it's usually defined some kind of self-actualization. Somebody else said it too. So
I've tackled this from the viewpoint of transaction analysis instead of basing it strictly on a hierarchy of needs, because I do believe that hierarchies of needs keep on changing as a person changes over his or her lifetime. A teenager may feel need for sex more than an old person, but an old person feels love as much as a teenager. And so I've taken the viewpoint that, for example, when people talk about love being having an onset like other emotions due to chemicals like oxytocin. So I have questioned the fact. See, look at the way that when the couples grow old, an old man and an old woman may love each other. They may not have any of those happiness chemicals in their bodies, yet they love each other and care for each other more. So my emphasis on love is not so much of an emotion which is based on physiological needs, but as a social emotion, and being a social emotion, something which can trigger off positivity in tourism, positivity not only in tourists but also in residents, how residents think towards tourists. If, for example, if we educate residents just as much as we educate tourists or try to educate tourists, it would be a far better situation, a more harmonious situation than at present, or what used to happen in cases of over tourism. So I think of love as a basic emotion, in consonance with some psychologists who question the fact that some psychologists, despite the fact that folk psychology places so much emphasis on love as in the form of novels, stories, poems, so many treatises written on love, epics written on love, and yet when it comes to the academic analysis of love, it is entirely missing, or not entirely missing, seriously it is seriously missing, or something. Let's say it's not as good as it should be. Not.
So let me just bring in, I'd like to bring in Andrea, just because she had a great question that kind of fits in with this, which is about peak experiences, right? So you're talking, it's not about the chemical kind of experiences, but at the same time.
I want to say something to that too.
Yeah, so do you want to, are you still there? I'm sorry, you've been hanging out for a while. Andrea, you still there? Yeah.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. Hi. Thank you for this wonderful webinar. It's so interesting. I'm tourism expert and geographer, but I am now switching to marketing and experiences. So that's why I'm very interested in peak experiences like flow, for example, from Csikszentmihalyi, the psychologist. And I was wondering if maybe Professor Singh has tackled this in his book, and how he sees like balancing the peak experiences with like more maybe ordinary experiences, and how, you know, how this maybe can lead to, you know, happiness and a pursuit of meaning, maybe. If it's clear.
Actually, I have not tackled rush, flow, and peak experiences in my book. I have read about it, but I have not tackled it. I was limited by the fact that these experiences have much to do with adventure tourism. Is that correct? Adventure tourism?
Yes, but not only. I mean, it can be also in relationships and yeah.
Yes. So no, I have not taken up peak experiences in my book. I have instead taken the cue from Nico Frijda, was a psychologist from the Netherlands. He devoted a number of books to studying emotion. He still studied emotion for most of his career, and he talks about emotion, especially love, including love emotions, as adaptive tools, ways in which animals adapt to the environment, and that is the perspective I have taken in my book.
Okay.
For example, I have defined tourism. Just if you allow me to repeat the definition of tourism
Sure.
from the viewpoint of the theory that I have taken in the book, all those theories combined, and that is tourism and continual human mobility is the human necessity to move across and stay in different geographical and or ecological habitats, and through love of and engagement in periodic travel to fulfill physical, physiological, social, societal, psychological, ecological, economic, spiritual, and linguistic needs, wants, and demand, and for general adaptation in order to survive and evolve as a race or species. So I think what you're talking about, peak experiences are part of physiological experiences, essentially have more to do with psychology
Well,
and with
in many
physiology.
ways, you could even
It's
think of it
about
as the movement of.
self-transcendence. I mean, I'm going the same direction
Transcendence,
as
yes.
Bridget earlier. Self-transcendence and self-actualization, actually, from the pyramid.
Yes.
I think she's talking about the same one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Maslow's pyramid. No,
No,
certainly, you know,
I haven't
when you
read
talk
that book.
about flow, you know, says Mihaly's ideas and those kinds of
Yes.
things, you know, we in a way, you're almost talking about you don't need physical movement. It's more about your movement inside, kind of, you know, I once in my one of my books, I was talking with somebody and they said they reached travel nirvana, right? This idea where like they fit the flow with everything else, like they felt actualized, they felt that their needs or their expectations, I was talking in terms of expectations, met the actual touristic experience, and like everything came together. We had that serendipitous, or that what we call the ethnographic moment when we're doing ethnography.
Exactly.
You know, and that's
Yeah.
that's an actualization of your, you know, the ethnographic moment is an actualization of your research plan. But certainly, like you said, there are certain times, you know, you don't need movement, physical movement, but you get your own internal movement where you see yourself in a different light. You have that self-actualization. I think that's what you guys were referring to, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can
So
I
I mean,
just
again,
say
love
something?
fits into that as well.
You know, actually, the fact is, there are so many other facets that I have not covered in the
Sure.
book. For example, eudaimonia or other such terms
Mhm.
have not been used at all in the book, but which have been dealt with by other scholars. My emphasis was on building a coherent anthropological theory of tourism, a theory of tourism which is consonant with fulfilling all aspects. See, not just the social and cultural aspect, but psychological, ecological, spiritual, linguistic. I've even talked about linguistic needs,
Yeah.
because there are a lot of people who want to learn languages, or because of the need to interact with people in their own language, travel to certain places.
Yeah.
For example,
Exactly. That was my case.
for example,
Actually, I had several students
example,
ask about the language of love and stuff like that, which of course we can't get to. But you know, it's interesting that was a big point too, is just linguistic and semantic ideas, you know, and
Yeah. And then the other one was the play, the
Play.
ludus. Very interesting. Yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
Very interesting. And also the love languages. I mean, it's fascinating. I read the Gary Chapman books, and I think, yeah, they can be translated to marketing somehow.
there's one love language, fifth love language that I talked about, I've introduced. I did not talk about at all. Is called love truths. Explaining to a person whom you love some truths about himself or herself, which may help improve the person as a person, and build, for example, those who are have drinking, excessive drinking habits or smoking habits,
Tough love.
telling the truth to them, yet in a way which does not hurt them, so that they can develop their personality. Love truths is part of love expression, which spouses do a lot, or the couples do a lot, and that is, I think, very important, in the sense that when you go on a tourist, when you're in a tourist setting, there are a lot of truths that come home to you. You're faced suddenly with truths. For example, a person who is rich or well off may suddenly find, looking at poverty in a developing country, going to visit or going to the slum, for example, slum tourism, may realize that how well off they are, and they may develop an empathetic attitude towards people of other cultures, or people who are not of the same class. So from that point of view, yes, love has um, a practical value as well, as it can explain truths to you, which are there in the wide world outside. But when one remains ensconced in one's home, one is constricted to one's home, one does not go out, one does not learn so many things about the world, which one can do through tourism. So love truths is also one of the love languages that
Well, thank
I've
you.
introduced.
Yeah, we've gone on. This is a great conversation. I wish we could continue it, and I thank you both for staying on and everything. Again, for everybody else, this is the book. You can get it on Roman Littlefield's page. This will be up as well on their page, and hopefully, if you haven't read it, you guys can review it as well. So, but this is great. Thank you so much, Sagar, for being here.
Thank you so much to all of you, especially. Yes, yeah, it's very nice talking to all of you. Good.
Thank you very much
you.
for that, Sagar.
Thanks
really
so
looking
much.
forward to that book.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seen a lot of your work. Thank you.